Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is discontinuity. So most of the time, life just unfolds in what seems like a continuous pattern or process. And every now and then there are experiences that disrupt that continuity. It can be an upset, like an injury, or uh, some kind of dramatic change that then wakes us up to life again in a very different way, where it rattles us out of our trance and brings us back into presence. So today we're going to be talking about discontinuity and the power to bring us back to wakefulness in life. So good morning, Rosalind. Welcome, welcome. It's great to be starting the day with you and with everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started talking about discontinuity, let's just take a few minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the motion, the temperature, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're talking about discontinuity, or we can also consider it disruption, where the routines of life might be disrupted with some kind of something that happens. Oftentimes, it takes something not so happy, like an illness or a fall, for instance, or some kind of sudden shock. I guess that's really what we're talking about. Not all shocks are bad, like the birth of a child is a discontinuity. Yes, you were going through a pregnancy and the anticipation was that there would be the birth of a child, but that birth then disrupts everything, and requires lots of shifting and adjustment. It can be a happy shift. Even a marriage can be a discontinuity, right? Because up until the point of marriage, there's been one level of relationship, and potentially that marriage shifts the context in sometimes for people in a very dramatic way. Sometimes it's a natural progression, but other times it's a very dramatic change. Certainly, death of a loved one is a dramatic discontinuity. So what we're talking about is these disruptions that occur that shake us out of our complacency or our trance. We go through so much of life in trance, where we're just sort of lulled into moving through this, that, and the other thing without really being present to what's happening. And when we can find devices to wake us up, we can come back to choosing in life in a more active way. Rosalind says retirement, people losing momentum for regular routine. That's an interesting conversation. Thank you, Rosalind. For sure, a change in work status. You might consider retirement, people losing momentum for regular routine. I know some people in retirement who have a very rigorous routine because it keeps them active and engaged. In addition, retirement might be just trying to explore, what do I want? You know, what are my actual preferences? This is an interesting thing that I encounter with a lot of my clients, is looking at a new phase of life and what do they want that to be? You know, when we wake up to our mortality, that can provide us with one of these discontinuous shocks to allow us to make new choices, to be considering things from a very different perspective in life when we're present to maybe an accident or something that is life-threatening, or a close call with some kind of medical condition, or even a diagnosis, or any number of things can then wake us into reevaluating, reassessing our values and our lifestyle and how we're living and the choices that we're making for ourselves. You know, we tend to fall into this trance that we have unlimited time and that life is just going to go on forever. And so we just keep walking in the same paths and the same steps and don't consider how time is marching by. And you know, the dreams, first of all, the deep dreams that we dare to dream have a time limit on them, right? Because it's potentially so that we would get to a place where we're not able to fulfill on those dreams because we don't have the physical strength or capacity or any number of other reasons. So the discontinuity gives us an opportunity to shake ourselves out of this daze and bring ourselves into greater presence, greater connection with the lives we're living rather than just perpetuating. And I think that there's profound value in allowing ourselves to step back and assess our lives and our options and our desires and dreams, and look at how we're fulfilling on those things. And it's interesting because we live in a paradox of time where in certain respects we're timeless and we transcend time and there's all the time in the world. And in other respects, we are time bound and at the effective time and have limited time. So holding both of those realities in balance, or at the same time anyway, can be very challenging. You know, in a certain respect, there's no urgency for anything, and in another respect, it's we can certainly create that urgency for ourselves in response to circumstances, right? So really the bottom line with this discontinuity is to wake us up to choice. And when we have that awakening, one of the things that's so foundational is to be able to connect and align with our values and our core sense of being and priority. And at any moment, we can choose. And move, for instance, is another really big discontinuity, right? Because we're literally pulling ourselves up from one circumstance and putting ourselves in another. We give ourselves these opportunities for new beginnings. And that's also what I'm talking about with discontinuity, is when there are these moments of discontinuity, we often scramble to get back to where we were before that disruption. But the thing is that those disruptions offer us profound opportunities for awakening, reassessing, creating a new direction for ourselves. So this was really interesting in a session last night. I've been working with a client for a long time who has experienced really deep trauma as a kid, really deep trauma, and was very deeply indoctrinated with the notion that what they had to say was irrelevant. They were irrelevant. What they wanted, how they felt, was irrelevant. And we were talking about how these perspectives, these attitudes became something that they actually internalized, that they don't have anybody out there necessarily saying that to them anymore, but they have so deeply internalized it that that's how they hear pretty much everything. You know, that they're readily waiting for confirmation that they're irrelevant, that what they have to say is unimportant, etc. And this is an interesting thing that we do, is we're taught how to treat others and how to treat ourselves. And then the perpetrators who taught us may perhaps deeply dysfunctional behaviors is no longer there, but we've internalized what we were taught. We were good students. And so we continue to brutalize ourselves in the absence of the original perpetrator. And so creating a discontinuity in that, disrupting that pattern, is actually really disorienting. So that's kind of what happened in this session on yesterday, where we exposed the fact that this was now a deeply internalized pattern that actually didn't belong to this person. And what would it look like to let that go and to be confident? And what we did was we looked not just confident, but confident, competent, heard, seen. And we were able to identify a time in their lives when they experienced all of those things, and they could feel it in their body and they could feel it in their being. And that experience was in such dramatic contrast to the internalization of not being good enough, not being heard or seen, that was for them linked very much to circumstance. But the thing that they understood in this session that created a discontinuity, we're getting back around, it's actually connected, was that that these were internal states that were states that they could recreate in this moment, that it wasn't dictated by circumstance, that they actually could generate the experience of both those states in this moment, independent of situation, and recognizing that they had both those things within them. They said, well, it's a battle between these two parts of myself. And I said, well, maybe it's not a battle. Maybe they're just learning to dance with each other. And maybe they can support each other and assist each other, these parts. And what happened was they said that they were just so exhausted at the end of the session that their head was swimming, because what was happening, and this often happens in this work, with the core connection work, is that the brain or the mind, whatever you want to call it, the awareness is trying to synthesize all this information and generate some kind of determination or conclusion from all of it, to make sense of it, and it doesn't square with the rational. And so it's almost like the brain just says, okay, sweetie, you just go to sleep, take a nap now. We've got this, we'll figure it out. And that's the other than conscious mind at work to rewire things to accommodate the new awarenesses that defy logic. And so logic is often part of, or indicated, or implemented in these programs that operate us. And I'm saying it deliberately that way rather than programs that we operate, because what happens is we fall into a thrall, a daze, a trance, where we just operate under these programs that play and play and play without our conscious awareness or our conscious engagement. They just create the baseline from which we operate, the lens through which we perceive the world. So it's the same notion. If you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? If you are someone, or I am someone who believes that I am unheard and I am unworthy, then I am going to bring that identity to my interactions, such that I am listening for being unheard. I'm watching for being unseen. I'm feeling into being irrelevant or dismissed. And we don't even know that we are experiencing life through those filters, because those filters are so ubiquitous. They exist everywhere. They're so all-encompassing that we don't even notice them, because that's all there is in our experience. It's the baseline. And so when we disrupt the baseline, that's the discontinuity that I'm talking about. And that's what facilitates the opportunity for change and transformation. And so we can actually, in that moment, there's an opportunity perhaps to say, oh, that's not mine. Like all of a sudden, this thing that has been the foundation of my sense of myself for so long, there's a recognition, oh my gosh, that's not me. I can actually put that down. And that in itself is a disruption. You know, because it's like, oh my gosh, now who am I? And in fact, that question of now who am I is one that is so daunting to so many people that they refuse the opportunity to relieve themselves of the burden of those predispositions, despite the fact that those predispositions, like I'm not enough, or I'm not heard, or I'm irrelevant, or whatever those things are, despite the damaging nature of those predispositions, we often cling to them willfully, despite the fact that they are that they are the source of so much pain, simply because we don't know who we would be without them. And this is, again, to go back to the notion of who we are is life expressing itself through this vehicle, this unique vehicle. That identity gives us the opportunity to maintain in its way a continuous identity, so that these disruptions, I can put this down, I can pick that up, don't alter that who I am is life expressing itself. But because we often identify with who I am as unheard, unseen, irrelevant, unworthy, etc., then if that disappears, then we don't know who we are anymore. So it's an interesting mind game. It's an interesting twist of mind that allows us to find continuity in something that is constantly changing. And there's a sense of security in being able to do that, in finding continuity. So Rosalind says, I've heard a guided meditation of putting these thoughts in a suitcase, feeling the burden and weight of them, then unpacking the unneeded weight, feeling lighter afterward. I love that. I love that. It's a beautiful meditation. I think of this stuff as, you know, a backpack filled with rocks. Same idea, you know, it's like, well, do I need that? Do I need that? You know, what is that is holding me down? You could still have the backpack and it can be empty, or you can let go of the backpack completely, put all the rocks down, and then what? You know, then what about the freedom of movement that you have? Yeah, it's very interesting how we wear identity as such a burden. You know, we create identities that for the most part are burdensome and painful, and cling to them with such tenacity. You know, I'm thinking all of a sudden of people who believe that the only way they're going to be productive is if they berate themselves, if they punish themselves, if they're mean to themselves, that's how they'll get motivated. You know, by saying, you worthless, you lazy, whatever it is, you know, that's the way that they're motivated. These are the things that we are taught. And look at how dysfunctional it is. Look at how dysfunctional so many of our foundational beliefs are, and how they perpetuate a system that is really, really toxic on so many levels. So discontinuity, if we can cultivate some level of discontinuity, it's another vehicle to wake us up, to allow us to just sort of shake ourselves out of the daze and come back to our values. What do I value? What do I care about? How am I serving those things in life? How am I fulfilling my greater purpose here and my passions that are unique to me and that are an expression of this gift of life that we each are here to express in our own unique way. So with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And as always, it's a great, great privilege and pleasure to me to have the opportunity to share this time with you and these thoughts and to expand ourselves together. So until next time, so much.